Welcome to the Modern Homesteading Podcast.
We have allowed ourselves to become so disconnected and ignorant about something that is as intimate as the food that we eat.
Be prepared to grow your own for victory.
God said, I need somebody strong enough to clear trees and heave bales, yet gentle enough to yean lambs and wean pigs and tend the pink-foamed pullets who will stop his mower for an hour to splint the broken leg of a meadowlark. So God made a farmer.
Hello and welcome to the Modern Homesteading Podcast. I'm your host, Harold Thornborough. Glad you're joining me today. It is July 9th, 2018. This is episode 96, and today we have a great interview for you with a lady named Michele Nutter. We'll hear all about her journey and what she's got going on here in just a few minutes, but before we get into that, I thought I'd just share a few things with you. It's been staycation week, and I took some time off, so that's why you haven't had a podcast in a few days. I kind of just had to get a lot of stuff done around here, and did a little bit of fishing, and just had a good time. Didn't go anywhere far away or anything, but got a lot of work done. So just been sticking around the house. But in that time, I finished the aquaponics tank, and we actually just put up a video of a property tour on YouTube. So go check out our YouTube channel. I'll put a link to that in the show notes today, so you can go check that out. Yeah, just a little journey around our little small town homestead here, and it ain't much, but we're doing quite a bit on a little tiny piece of property. So go check that out if you get a chance. Also, really just fighting that bug pressure still. I mean, we have really been all about that here recently. The Japanese beetles, the squash bugs, it's just been such a hard year for the insects this year, but we're getting through it, I mean, just have to be diligent and keep things removed, keep things sprayed with our organic mixtures. We generally use a little bit of soapy water and some peppermint oil, and then we're experimenting with some different stuff, making some homemade sprays with things like garlic and peppers and things like that too, to try to drive off the insects. But it's all an experiment. We've never really had this kind of bug pressure, so I'm learning a lot here as we're dealing with it. But it's been a journey, no doubt about it. But boy, I've been really excited about the aquaponics tank. I mentioned that a minute ago. Finished that this week. Finally got some plants in it, some fish in it. It's running. You know what? I'm really pleased with that thing so far. I mean, it's been up and running for almost a week now as I'm recording this, and I'll tell you, I think it's going to be a blessing to have, and it's really opened my eyes up to the possibilities of what could be done with some aquaponics. So wouldn't be surprised if a lot more of that starts making an appearance on my little homestead in the future. So we'll see how it goes. I'm going to let that run probably this year. We'll probably won't expand on it too much this year, but if things go well the rest of this year, I could see us opening up a lot of doors in the aquaponics journey next year for sure. So we'll see how that goes. Let's just jump right into our interview with Michele, and she's going to tell us all about what she's doing on her homestead, and I think you're really, really going to enjoy this episode. Well, I'm joined today on the podcast by Michele Nutter. Michele is a homesteader and author, and I have a feeling she probably wears a few other hats like most homesteaders do. And with that, Michele, welcome to the Modern Homesteading Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, you just recently jumped into the Homestead Front Porch Facebook group, and that's where I first heard about what you're doing there. And you kind of came in, and you stirred things up a little bit. You came in there and told a bunch of us what you were doing, and some of the things you had going on there, and it interested a bunch of people. And some folks said, "Hey, get her on the podcast." And I said, "That's a great idea." So, well, here you are. And
that's great. That's wonderful.
Well, it sounded like you had an awful lot going on. We're all real interested in hearing about it. So could you just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into homesteading?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we live in East Central West Virginia in a little rural kind of community. We have, homes around us and everything like that. So we're not out on, acreage or anything. We're on about just a little more than a half an acre. Mm-hmm. And our family is my husband, myself. We've been married for 26 years. And then our son is 24. We have a 22-year-old daughter and then an 8-year-old daughter. So our older two kids are kind of putting one foot out in the world now. Our son works in a city a little ways away from us, about 2 hours away. And so he's still involved in a lot of the things on our homestead, but he's not at home continually. And our older daughter is in college, so she's home during the summers and now and then, so she's still involved in everything. And then the 8-year-old is totally immersed in it. So we live on, like I said, about a little more than a half an acre, and we've got a lot going on that small space.
Yeah, sounds like. Well, what led you down this path?
Well, we came to homesteading, and really what I loved right off when I heard your first podcast that I came across was the whole spokes in the wheel thing. All of our wheels look different, and we've all got different spokes. We came to homesteading through living a frugal lifestyle. We had, my husband's always been the breadwinner, and I've stayed at home and raised our kids and taken care of, like, the home things. And in 2012, my husband faced a job loss. We saw it coming with some layoffs and a lot of talk and everything, so we knew what was coming. And whenever we saw the layoffs happening and those kind of things, we decided, and really I have to say I decided, we're going to face this with some grace and, not go into this like with doom and gloom. So I kind of looked at our finances and the way we were living and said, we have to stop being like everybody else. We have to stop living status quo, and we're going to have to make some pretty serious changes here. So we came to homesteading through frugal living. And I started, every evening after dinner, sitting down and making a college course almost out of looking for ways to save money, looking for ways to manage our finances better, and, what we could do to get ourselves in, a better place financially to face this job loss. Because I knew my husband would find work somewhere, but I knew that he would either be making a lot less money or he would be traveling and having to spend to be somewhere. And that's exactly what happened. He, when he lost his job, he was laid off for a month. He found other work, but he had to live away from home. So it was like renting a place and, those kind of things. But anyway, we started finding a lot of things pointing us towards growing our own food, as a money saving, idea. And from that, I started reading about raised bed gardening, square foot gardening, composting, all these kind of things. Right. And shopping at farmers markets, because we have, just a little over half an acre. That's not a lot of land to grow tons of food on, or at least I didn't think so at the time. And then we didn't have tillers and tractors and things like that, and it cost money to have, somebody to come and do that. So we went the raised bed route, and the first summer we had one raised bed. We raised some things, and we were thrilled. We started shopping at farmers markets, which led me to a local-ish farmer who I've gotten to be fast friends with. And she had grass-fed pastured meats for sale. And so I go up to her and I'm like, what's the difference in the chicken you're selling and what I buy at the grocery store? Educate me. I don't know anything about this. So she starts telling me, what the differences are about heritage breeds and pastured animals and nutrition and all these things. And it just spiraled from there into more gardening, more raising our own animals. She was really the inspiration for us to start raising our own chicken, our own turkey. We don't have room on our land for big animals, but we can do chickens and turkeys, Right.
So you kind of got into it out of being frugal, and then it kind of led down it sounds like more of a healthy eating path, even with the
absolutely
farm raised meat and such. Yeah, that's a pretty common story, I think. But now, did you find that it did help you to be frugal and walk down that path?
It has in some ways, and in other ways, it's become, like you said, more of a health and more of a moral situation. Because, for instance, I've had people say, well, how much money did you save raising your own, meat birds, chickens and turkeys? Oh, we don't save money doing that because, our chickens weigh out at about, we raise Red Rangers, and our chickens weigh out at about 5.5 pounds each. well, if you were to want to buy a chicken from me, it'll cost you about $13 a chicken,
Right,
if you want, as far as covering the expense and everything. But, now it's more of an issue of how we stand morally on that, and then also the nutrition factor.
Right.
But on the other hand, we go buy tomatoes in bulk because we don't grow enough tomatoes to can. We get a few here and there and eating tomatoes during the summer, but we really don't raise enough to, can what we need. Last year, my older daughter and I put up, I think, 100 quarts of tomatoes. And so we go and buy that. Well, really, that is cheaper, when you do the math, than going and buying, a few cans every time you're at the grocery store.
Yeah, that's what I find. Some things you can save money doing, some things you can't. Some things actually cost you more, right. but like you said, it's a lot healthier, and there's a moral aspect to it as well, as far as just the ethics involved in raising meat in that way.
Exactly. And, I think it's Joel Salatin that says, have you priced cancer lately?
Yeah.
And I know you have priced it, and it's not cheap. And it's right. My husband and I were just discussing this recently about, I'm 46 and he's 52. And so we're both healthy. We're not on, any kind of medications or have any kind of chronic conditions or anything like that, yet. So we're trying to cut that off at the pass, and we're trying to teach our children. And really, anybody who gets near me, has to hear about it. And, that's what my family was just saying earlier. Oh, you're going to talk to somebody else about this for a change instead of just us,
That's
but,
great.
It's a health thing. And I'm into the herbal, medicine thing now, too. And, that's one of the things we really want to expand is how, the different kinds of herbs we can forage and grow. And we're into foraging and hunting. And like I said, sourcing from local people, farmers markets, those kind of things too. But as far as the frugal end of things went, there was a lot of household stuff. Everyone, when they go down the frugal path, they start making their own detergent, their own cleaners, a lot of, health products. I mean, all those kind of things that your run-of-the-mill stuff you need from day to day. I've replaced a lot of what we used to buy in cans, boxes, bottles, and bags with homemade products that, are just really made out of simple materials for the most part.
And real expensive, too. A lot of a budget can go there for sure.
Exactly, absolutely. And then, you get into the health issue with that, too. I mean, I make our family's deodorant, for instance. When you start looking into what are in antiperspirants and things like that, it's scary. And what I find is, we're all ignorant of those things until we get into something that leads us into this kind of path, this lifestyle where we start thinking, oh, wait, I just took it for granted that's what you did.
Right.
And so, we've come at it from all angles. And whenever I was looking for ways to save money, the immediate money savings were the things I was most interested in right off the bat. Later, we did the Financial Peace University thing and, the whole managing your finances end of things. But at that point, we didn't have a whole lot to manage, and we knew we were going to have a whole lot less when my husband lost his job.
Yeah.
So,
Right. Yeah. Well, it sounds like you're doing quite a bit. So you're gardening, you're raising chickens, you're making your own household items, herbal medicines. Is there anything else you're doing in your homestead?
Oh my goodness, it seems like there's so much. Just to name a few things. Yeah, the gardening thing, the raised bed, and we have some in-ground garden now too that we're expanding a little bit at a time. So that whole thing, and then, learning how to can, learning how to dehydrate. I had water bath cans a little bit, kind of like more for fun, and, it was interesting. Now it's like a serious thing, and I was telling someone the other day our house is more a factory than a home sometimes, because we've got all this equipment and things going. But, the composting, we've gotten, a little farther along on that, and just so many things. My husband built a simple greenhouse, and that's helped to kind of lengthen our growing season. Yeah. And then we have a mini orchard where we have blueberries, raspberries, apples, pears. We're trying our hand at figs and almonds, but in West Virginia, that's a little, iffy and a little harder to do, And then my husband and son built a smokehouse so we can smoke meats and things like that. Oh. And that is wonderful. That was one of the best additions to our homestead. We have we're in the middle of changing over to a wood heat system. We have had propane heat since we lived in our home. We've lived there 25 years. And always propane. Oh, it's so great. You just turn the dial and it's wonderful and the truck comes and that's great. Now our thinking is, what about when the truck can't come, or if you don't have the money for the truck to come? So we have put in, one wood-burning stove this summer. We're planning on installing, actually it's sitting on our deck ready to go, but we're going to install the second wood burner, which will make the propane become like the backup heat, and it's like... Now, okay, I'll follow the path here. We started out being frugal. We got into this for being frugal, and we kind of went into the health aspects of it and the ethics part of it. And now we're like going down the preparedness path a little bit, I see. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's the whole thing. I found you via YouTube. Whenever I am doing housework, which is a lot of the time, and whenever I'm, doing dishes or whatever it is, and, even I exercise every day when I'm doing that. I'm listening or watching YouTube videos, podcasts, things like that. And you kind of start, as you get into this homesteader, mindset, I started out watching a couple of different, actually, whenever we got rid of our cable. And in the book, I talk about we dropped to like a small cable package and all this stuff. And then we finally bit the bullet and just said we don't want it anymore. So we got Roku, to watch internet television. We found some homesteader channels through that, and that led to YouTube, and it just, spiraled from there. But there are a lot of YouTube channels that are homesteading, but some of them, the flavor is more prepper.
Right.
And, some of it, it's more health. Some of it is more gardening intense, those kind of things. And I love it all. And it's really... my husband's the leader of our home, but this effort's been spearheaded. I'm like, here's what we're doing next. We're making cheese. We're making candles. We're going to do this. My family's kind of like, okay, are we? But, like, what is she going to do next? But,
that's great.
Yeah, it's all over the place now, and, it's like beans, bullets, and Band-Aids. I'm like, we need to see what kind of balance we've got here with preparedness. And, not even for some kind of a big, government shutdown or something like that. But in West Virginia, we have windstorms, we have electrical storms. In the winter, we have heavy snows, ice storms, things that knock out power. A few years ago, we had a windstorm in the summer that, knocked out power in our little town, and it was like a ghost town. It was scary looking. And even our water system, our public water system was, in danger there for a while. Like, if we don't get some generators and some things in here to get this water going, we're going to run out, water's going to be shut off. So we have really kind of taken on that preparedness mindset too, for times like that, extended times of no power.
Anytime I get with somebody who kind of just says, "Oh, so you're a prepper, huh?" And they kind of say it with that negative tone, and
right.
It's to me, it's never about that. It's about being responsible. If you want to take care of your family and be not in a position that it's a burden on other people or even could cause harm to your family, it's just a responsible thing to do, to be somewhat prepared for even the simplest of disasters.
Absolutely. That's exactly how we feel. Of course, we're not prepared for some, horrible something that lasts, on and on.
Yeah.
But, we've got, we've got a lot in place so that, and I know even just a little like, ice storms and power outages and things like that, there was a time when something expensive, we would not have been prepared. And not only that, but we would not have had the mindset. We wouldn't have, and my husband, he's a little bit more, he probably would have been more prepared than me because he's a hunter and he's kind of like, more of a backwoodsman type, person. I grew up, and let me tell you, people that hear that I'm raising chickens and doing these things, even 7 or 8 years ago, if you would have said, you're going to run chicken tractors in your front yard, I would have called you a liar. I was raised, I didn't even have pets. I didn't know anything about animals, was not interested. My parents were raised, my mom was raised on a farm, and she and my dad were married in the 50s, and she says, I couldn't wait to get off the farm and go shop at the grocery store and have things easier. And now she says that I'm turning into her mother, because I'm always with the apron canning and, dehydrating and freezing. And the herb thing is real big with me now. I do a lot of foraging for herbs, and, I'm not against Western medicine. Thank God for it. It's wonderful. I just think it's reached for too quickly and too often.
Yeah, that's exactly how I feel about it as well too. It's got there's some good there, and a lot of good gets accomplished through it. But yeah, we're way too quick to jump to that, I think.
Right, exactly. So, we have we treat our minor illnesses and things like that. And I find that as we've changed our eating, we don't get ill as much. It seems like our immune systems, and that's one thing I'm real big on, is anything that can build your immune system, I think should be in your diet just constantly, And one of the things that we're moving towards as far as eating right now is more greens. And this winter, I want to set up, we were discussing this at dinner yesterday. I'm like, guess what we're doing this winter? I've watched the Old Alabama Gardener, is one of my favorite gardening intense YouTube channels. And, he does the gutter system for growing lettuces, like in his basement with the grow lights and everything. And I would like to try that this winter so we could have greens, because where we live, we're in this rural town with one grocery store. And as a matter of fact, we kind of know the family that owns that grocery store. And you can say, well, I wish they would get more of this and more of that and, carry kohlrabi and all these things. They can't do that when they can't sell it. And, as most of us in the homesteading community understand, most people, I would say, they don't even understand, the importance of nutrition or what is nutritious. And I know that, we spend a lot of our life eating out of boxes, cans, and bags, and we still do some of that. We haven't perfected it by any means, but, like I said, I think the greens are really important. I think they're one of the most important things that we can add into our diet. That's not something we can get here in January in West Virginia.
Right.
So, and especially in a rural town, and so, it's something that I want to incorporate. I'd like to be able to, to try doing that. And, my son says, Mom wills things to be. And, so success is pretty important to me whenever I get started on one of these projects.
Right. Well, let me ask you this. A few minutes ago, you mentioned that you're getting into foraging quite a bit for your herbal medicines and stuff. Now how have you learned that? Is someone showing you how to pick the right things? Are you learning from books, videos? How are you learning to forage?
Well, I'm glad you asked me that, because I can give a little shout out to my grandmother, my mom's mom. She left this list of herbal remedies that I always kept, and it meant so much to me because it was in her handwriting, that kind of thing. But as we got started in this, and this was one of the first things that, I don't know, it just kind of spoke to me. Like, I was reading her herbal remedies one day, and I'm like, there's just something about that I'm drawn to. And so she was kind of, my inspiration for that. I've always been a little bit interested in how that all works. But like you pointed out, how do you get to learn it? And I've had people ask me, how can you tell, how do you learn this? It has been through reading a lot of books. I find it very valuable to get with somebody else who can show you, hey, that's Mullen, hey, that's, whatever. And, I've collected a lot of books. And there again, with the frugal thing, well, if you're frugal, should you be out buying books about foraging? Well, it's really important to us. And instead of, paying for cable, we buy books about foraging.
Right. Yeah. Well, I have a lot of people, talk about that. They're interested in foraging, but everybody's always, a little iffy about, well, should I pick that, or is that the right thing? Or especially when it comes to mushrooms, especially people are really touchy about that. And people always ask, what's the best way to learn? And I do point people at that. Well, if you can find somebody local that can show you that does this, that's the best way, because then you get hands-on experience with somebody who knows what they're doing. And then there's also books and videos and other ways too, but there's no replacing that, really, getting one-on-one experience with somebody that knows what they're doing with that.
Exactly. And I point that out. I share a lot of herbal, like different herbs that I'm using and things that I forage and grow and everything. And I'll say, always make sure if you're going to use books, cross-reference between several books, because some of them have drawings, some of them have pictures, some have better information than others. And so, and normally if I'm going to go buy a book, I cross-reference between several things. And I find it so just wonderful, really, that the first year that I got interested in herbs, and this is, or interested in foraging a lot and drying them and keeping them, was a couple of years ago. And I asked my husband to let a little patch of our yard that spring, I'm like, right here, I'm just going to put like 4 stakes, let that grow up like to weeds. And he was like, what are you doing now? So I let that grow up, and there's all these things. We look at our grass when we go out with our lawnmower and mow it down, and that's just grass. But when you let that grow up, you see, no, that's plantain, that's elk, that's red clover, whatever. And a lot of things like that are growing in people's yards that are medicine and food. And I think that's part of the prepper mentality, too, that if you're out somewhere and you're, 2 weeks from nowhere or whatever and something happens, you need to know that yard stops bleeding or whatever,
Right.
Planting will draw out toxins, those kind of things. So that, because, if something happens and we're left on our own, in an on our own situation, we're not going to have the pharmacies and that kind of thing, or even the grocery stores. So one of the best preps, I think, is to know how to forage and know what's edible and how to use something as medicine, at least in a pinch like that,
Yeah, and some of that stuff works better than what you would buy at a pharmacy or something. I mean, I find that.
Absolutely.
Use plantain for a bug bite or something like that. I mean, it works as good, if not better, than anything you're going to get over the counter.
Absolutely, and it's right there, at your fingertips for the most part. I mean, plantain grows in the cracks of sidewalks,
Right.
And, everywhere I'm at now, and my husband even mentioned this, we were driving down the interstate the other day, and he's like, when, like, you're looking for deer or you're looking for something that he's a hunter, you get that crick in your neck from looking out one side of the vehicle, for miles. And he was like, now I'm doing it looking for mullein and, all these different things or whatever it is. And I can't believe the amount of things, like I said, that were growing right in our yard. And even like we have yucca plants. Well, I had tried to mow them down with the lawnmower years ago because I thought, well, what is this, and didn't realize that that's food, that is, you can make soap out of the root. I mean, there's so many things that you can do with a simple plant that you find everywhere around here,
Yeah, right. And I think that's one of them homesteading skills that a lot of people want to learn, and a lot of folks are afraid of it. But I think it's truly one of the most valuable skills you can learn as a homesteader.
Absolutely. I agree completely. And my son, he's real handy and crafty and everything. He built me an herb drying rack. So I have this, neat thing that I can, in an upright situation where I've got things hanging, just drying all the time, putting things back, so that we have these things, at our fingertips, and I can make things out of them. And you wouldn't believe the times just for simple, little aches and pains and whatever, little scrapes and bruises and things like that I have used these herbal remedies. And like you said, they work sometimes a lot better. And, nature's got all the constituents. I mean, when you take use dandelion for something, you're not just pulling one thing out and synthesizing that, and then it's a little bit dangerous at that point sometimes. It's got all the buffers in it that you need, for your body to assimilate that without making you sick and having side effects and things. You always have to have caution, and like you said, people are a little bit afraid, and I was too, and honestly, when I find something new, I always try to myself first before I let, anybody else in my family use it or anything.
Absolutely.
But,
guinea pig.
Yeah, exactly. I'm always like, I'll have a little of this, and if it doesn't kill me, you guys can use it or whatever. But but really, it's been great, and it's just led, the whole path. We have learned so many different skills. I was thinking about even roasting coffee beans. I mean, we went to a farmer's market, the same market that I met the lady with the chickens, and that started the whole. She started telling me about documentaries, and I started watching the documentaries, and we learned about Joel Salatin. We went and visited Polyface, and my son actually earned an apprenticeship there and couldn't do it because of his work. He was just starting into the workforce and really couldn't say, I need time off immediately. But he got to spend a couple of days there. They do part of their apprenticeship. The way that they choose is you go and you do like a 2-day work stint, and then, they narrow it down. But, Joel's doing wonderful things there. And, you find all these wonderful things. But whenever we were at the farmer's market, I love coffee. We're big coffee drinkers. And there was a family roasting coffee beans and selling them, there. And, of course, it's expensive. It's, awesome, but, a little bit out of our budget. So I started thinking, why can't I do that? Well, I YouTube it, and it's like, oh, that's the easiest thing on earth, But I would have thought it was something horribly complicated, that your average person can't do. And that's another little thing that, I've learned to do, that we buy coffee beans in bulk, we roast our own. Just so many things like that. I just got into soap making recently. And there again, I thought, oh, lie, no, I'm afraid of that. Can't go there, whatever. Now, it's the most simple, easy thing in the world, and just absolutely wonderful. I've got about 100 bars of soap put back for winter now.
Yeah.
And, so.
It's funny how we're afraid of everything we try until we do it the first time, and then we're like, well, that wasn't too bad at all. I know the first time most people use a pressure canner. They're scared to death of a pressure canner, and then it just becomes second nature to them, and they get so used to it.
Absolutely.
It's not scary at all.
Absolutely. I was afraid. And I remember my husband, we don't have cable, and there was some big game on, and he was going to my mother's house, he and my son, and the girl that I actually went to, they're not sports fans, but they went out to visit Grandma, and they're like, okay, we're going to go out to your mom's. And I'm like, okay, I'm using this for the first time. You might want to call and check on me, make sure I didn't, blow myself up.
Wow.
But like you said, now it's no big deal at all, and I don't have to go and consult the directions in the books and all that. The things that we can the most, I know how to do now. And, people think that, I think people sell themselves short. And when they look at homesteading as a whole, they think, oh, that's too much. I just can't. But start with one thing, whatever, whether you come to it for health reasons or whether you come to it for frugal reasons or whatever it is, start somewhere.
And one thing's for sure, if you start, it won't just be for one thing. You'll do just like I did and you did and every other homesteader I know.
Yes.
You'll start going down a whole bunch of paths and you'll love it.
Yes.
That's just the way it is.
Yes, absolutely. My husband says it's like an addiction. You can't, you can't quit. It's wonderful. And it's such a real lifestyle and so honest. I mean, I was raised going to the grocery store. I was just telling my husband this morning, if you would have asked me when I was a little kid, where does food come from? Of course I knew that it grew, from somewhere. But I would have said, well, you go to the grocery store and get it. Now, if you would ask my 8-year-old, where does food come from, she would point out our front window and say, right there in the yard or whatever.
That's awesome.
And that's a wonderful thing, too. We're homeschooling our 8-year-old. Our other 2 kids went to public school. They did great. Our son's a college graduate. Our daughter is going to be a senior this year in college. And so, they're working their way through, and they did fine. But that was kind of the problem. It was your average experience where our 8-year-old is getting to really experience everything. And I feel like I'm getting to educate her more widely on different subjects. She knows as much about herbs as I do.
I'm going to say, you're learning right along with her, aren't you?
Absolutely. And we'll be out in the yard, and I'm like, and they're not always quite as interested. If you're around little kids and gardening and things, it's like, they'll plant one row of something and then go play. And I think that's fine as long as they're, as they get older, they'll find their place. But I'm constantly telling my girls with the herbs, and my son's pretty interested too. He's not around as much while I'm doing those kind of things, but I'll tell him, I know you're not completely into this like I am, but one day you may need to know this, and I want you to have an idea of how this all goes. But my 8-year-old can tell you, if you said, this hurts, that hurts, I have a fever, a headache, whatever, she can tell you. She'll prescribe an herb for you,
Well, I'll tell you, and if they don't appreciate that now, they will at some point in their life, because I know there's a lot of things my mom and dad taught me when I was a little kid and didn't care about them at all back then, but now you go, wow, I'm glad I know that, so.
Absolutely. I lost my dad late 2015 to ALS, and we watched him, really just have a bad last couple of years of his life. And I think now we planted popcorn this year. We have never tried to grow it or anything. So far, it seems like it's doing great. And, I thought about him as I was planting that popcorn. He was with me saying, okay, this is how you do it, And I was a little kid thinking, I want to go over to my swing set and play or whatever. But I'm so glad that, that I paid enough attention to keep some of that with me. And I think now we were just getting into this, because like I said, it started out more with the saving money and the frugal and those kind of things and household stuff to begin with. And he was not able to come out. The first year we raised chickens in chicken tractors. I think he was a little bit doubtful, like, you're going to raise chickens, you know? I'm like, I'm going to try. But, you know, we filmed everything, you know, whenever we did the butchering and all that stuff, we filmed it so we could show it to him because he was bedfast at that point. And he got to see all that. And I'm thinking if he was here today, he would be, you know, almost 80 years old running chicken tractors in their yard, you know?
Right, yeah. That's great. Well, it sounds like you got a lot going on, but now let me ask you this. Now, you mentioned your book earlier. I mentioned your book, too. I picked it up last week. Really good read. I enjoyed it. What made you want to write a book?
Well, the reason I wanted to write the book was because when we first went frugal, whenever we got interested in that kind of a lifestyle, I read a lot of books. I read a lot of blogs. I was searching any information I could find for anything, you know, just anywhere. And the books that helped me the most were the ones written by, you know, your average person like me. They weren't polished. They weren't edited. They weren't, you know, perfect diction or grammar or whatever. But these people had been through similar situations to us and said, look, here's how you can save money right now, or here's how you can cut down on, you know, the groceries or the whatever. And that was one of the first, you know, places we really wanted to cut back was groceries. And it's funny now, that's the last place that we save money, you know. But I really wanted to write the book so that people that were facing times like we were facing could have some information from someone who'd been there. And, you know, I think you can kind of feel like in the book that, you know, yeah, she did this and she knows this works, or, you know, I feel like that was the best information I got. I mean, I read a lot of books, and some of them were, you know, like polished, edited, you know, popular books. But a lot of them were by people that nobody, you know, knows their name.
Yeah, just their story, how they got started or what they were doing. And that's what I got from your book as well. And I thought it was real helpful. It was real encouraging. And you do tell your story of why you got into it and what the kind of things you're doing. It sounds like you're doing more now than what you were doing when you wrote the book.
Absolutely.
I really enjoyed it. When did you write that?
Let's see. I published it. It was published the first day or two of 2016. So I kind of got writing on it in 2015-ish.
Okay. So you probably came a long ways in a couple of years then, haven't you?
Absolutely. And the sequel is in the making. But, you know, summertime, all of the paperwork and those kind of things stop, and I don't have a lot of time, computer time and that kind of thing. Like I said, I carry, you know, a device with me and, you know, Kindle or whatever, and listen to podcasts. As a matter of fact, I was on the treadmill when I found your first podcast. And, you know, I go about an hour and a half a day on the treadmill. So I was like, you know, just going through a list of them and, you know, loving it. And, but yeah, I plan on getting back to work on the sequel, and it will be sort of a, and then what happened type book. And the whole gist of it will really be, it'll be more centered around homesteading because that's the direction we've taken.
Yeah.
The whole homesteading thing.
So you have a future book in the works here soon. What else you have going on? I thought you said something about maybe some courses or something you were going to try to.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm planning on doing an online course. Starting it this fall, too. We'll get back into my daughter's homeschooling, and so I'll get back into my schooling, too. But I'm planning on taking a course to become a certified clinical herbalist. And this is an online thing, and it's kind of a go-at-your-own pace. And I've actually looked at several courses to see what fit me best and, you know, what course I thought I would get the most out of. But I'm going to start that because I would like to, I feel like I've got all this information about herbs and herbal medicine and everything, but I need it organized. You know, I need to know a little more how to look at things and sort of diagnose, you know, what's going on and that kind of thing. So that's something that I'm planning on doing. And I'm assuming it's a go at your own pace, and usually my pace is pretty quick. But sometimes family obligations and things come up and stop you in the middle of things like that.
Yeah.
So we'll see. But hopefully by spring, I'm hoping to have that done. I'm hoping to have the book, you know, maybe by next spring, because like I said, it's in the works, but I'm not quite there yet. And so those are a couple of things I'll be working on all winter when things slow down after, you know, canning season and firewood and all that.
Now, you said earlier you were doing some filming for some of the things you were doing. Do you have a YouTube channel or anything where folks can see anything that you're doing?
I don't.
Oh, you're going to have to work on that.
Yeah, exactly. I've had a couple people ask me about that, and that's something that I would consider. It really is. We have a YouTube handle or a name because to comment and things you have to. And our personality on YouTube is Rough Hewn Homestead, and that is what we call our homestead is Rough Hewn. Okay. And that kind of started because whenever we were starting to need some infrastructure for chickens and different things like that. There's a guy on YouTube called Jane Zero, and he's from Southern Ohio. And I always loved, we quote him all the time. He's like, when I'm going to build something, I've got to go source these materials, cheaply, and it takes a long time. And I can't just feel like when I'm going to build a barn, I can't call the barn dude. And, I'm always saying we can't call the barn dude, to come just build us a barn. We have to do things on a budget, and we have to do things, so that it's allowing for all the other things that have to be done too. So my husband had found this really great deal in some rough-hewn lumber, and we built a smokehouse out of it. We built our woodshed, all these different things, and we're sourcing stuff from all over. So our homestead is not Better Homes and Gardens. It's not beautiful. I mean, it's beautiful to us because we know what's coming from it. Right. But, no one's going to come take pictures and say, look how perfect and beautiful. It's rough-hewn, and I'm kind of a rough-hewn person. I'm like, it's not beautiful, it just gets the job done.
More about the function, getting out of what you need to get
absolutely.
Done.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, I like Jane Zero too. He's a very real guy. I've watched that YouTube channel quite a bit. I like him.
Absolutely, he's so real. And really, what hooked me with him was, I was looking. When I find a channel, they'll have suggested videos or whatever on YouTube for things like you've been watching. And when I saw the dedication he had for his wife when she was ill, as a matter of fact, the hospital that his wife, he mentioned where she goes to the hospital is where my son works. And of course, that was years before he started there. But he, his dedication to his wife and her health and her, her recovery and those kind of things, that's really what that means. That meant a lot to me. That's kind of what hooked me on going back for more with this channel. And then it's just, I like that he does things frugally, and his attitude about how he goes about, building their infrastructure and adding things as he can and those kind of things. But I'm telling you,
I like him because he don't try to impress anybody. He's just doing his thing and he's sharing it. And I love that about the guy.
Absolutely. And that's us too. I've had people come to me, and especially about the herbal thing. It's funny. I don't have people calling me saying, help me get a chicken tractor going in my front yard. People are not as turned on to that where I'm at. But, the herbal thing, I have so many people, it's been surprising. I just started putting up, a picture of like mullein or a picture of, whatever, lobelia, something. And they're like, what would it help? What would that do? Where can I find it? And they're, filling my inbox with asking me questions. I'm assuming that people are tired of being prescribed medicines that they're told, you're going to take this for the rest of your life and you're never going to get well. You're going to keep being sick. Right. So we would go to buy a product and they would say, this doesn't work. Would you please buy it from me? We would never do that. And I think that's been the big response, with the herb thing. And, but yeah, there's so many channels on there. And like I said, we started out with like the frugal thing. Living on a Dime was one of the channels that we watched a lot to begin with. And, that's a whole, saving money, frugal, that kind of thing. And then it's just blossomed out into the farming and especially, small animals and that kind of thing. We can't have anything large yet. One of the things that we would like to do is buy a little more land near us to expand a little bit. But we never have the goal of, we're not trying to market garden or sell meat or anything like that. Our idea mostly is to feed ourselves. And we do that. I mean, we're growing all of our own, we're raising all of our own chicken, turkey, and then we source beef and pork. We don't eat a whole lot of pork, but beef and pork from local places or local-ish as we can, and those kind of things, and keeping the freezer full of those things. And then my husband and son hunts too, so they source meats that way. And then the whole foraging thing, the gardening, it's just, I think that with the gardening too, that I feel about gardening like some people feel about foraging. I'm like, I have no idea what a tomato needs. I don't know how to grow green beans. And even now, when we try new things, I'm like, okay, this is another learning experience because I have no idea what I'm doing here.
Yeah. Well, every time I think I've got a handle on it, some year will trip me up. Like this year, the pests have just been horrible. So I've been, battling insects like crazy this year, like worse than I've ever had them. And you just, as a gardener, it's just, you're facing new things all the time. I like the challenge, but also like to eat good and, so.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right. I've noticed that too, that we've had a lot of beetles and things like that. And, you're constantly having to change your game up a little bit. And, I'm learning so much more that, the natural route, and I understand, the draw to try, to the chemicals and that, because it's like synthetic medicine. It's like take it and the pain goes away immediately or whatever. But the same thing with the, synthetic, fertilizers and pesticides and things. But we've chosen to go, the organic route, and it's amazing to me what I've learned about, like, compost. When we first, started a compost pile, and I said that's about the only risque thing that was in my book, if you want to call it that. My husband was like, we're going to have this, big pile of junk in, the middle of our yard, and he was a little, like, iffy about that. And I'm like, no, we're going to have a big pile of junk at the bottom of our yard.
I laughed when I read that in your book. I thought that was pretty funny. Yeah. He seemed really concerned about that, yeah.
And I think you can tell from talking to me, I'm like, I got this idea. Let's go do it right now. I'm real like, let's get on this. And the good thing, I've always been a little bit afraid of failure, and I think homesteading has changed that for me because now I know there's going to be failure sometimes. If you have livestock, there'll be dead stock sometimes. If you grow tomatoes, not all of them are going to produce and be wonderful or whatever. And even like with our greenhouse and things like that, I've had to learn what grows in a greenhouse. I mean, the first year I planted spinach in it, and it bolted like in a day. It was not good. I started it too late. It got hot, and where to position things, and then like the watering systems. I am so grateful that we don't have to depend on like city water for watering because for one thing that's expensive, and for another thing we don't want the chemicals. And so we installed a water system. I think in the book I talk about my husband and son built this little, it was out of like, I don't know, 30-gallon garbage cans or something, and it was this whole water catchment thing, it was good. But then we expanded to these IBC totes, and now we've got, several hundred gallons of, capacity to hold water. So we water our gardens with that, and that works out great. And I think every time it rains now, and I think, oh, it's filling up our, our tanks. And, my son has a funny story. He even said to his girlfriend one day, it started raining. It was raining for days. And she was like, oh, this rain. And he's like, yeah, well, Mom and Dad's tanks will be getting full. And she was like, tanks? What are you talking about? What do you mean? He was like, oh, yeah, because we have our tanks plumbed to our toilets. So we flush with rainwater. And that's pretty cool, too. And that cut our water bill in like half. So, it's like, when you come to our house. In the
Facebook groups the other day, and people were asking you about that. That's pretty interesting. Why waste your decent water out of your well when you can just use the rainwater to do that? Yeah, that's good.
Exactly. Yeah. I know somebody said, is it expensive? I've seen all these plans for these expensive. And I'm like, no. The only thing, ours is not gravity fed, so we had to have a pump. And that was the most expensive part of it, which paid for itself in the first two water bills that we saved money. Yeah. And
why did you have to go that route? Is there a reason for that, or did you go gravity fed, or?
We just weren't sure how to go about and make sure we were successful. And then the way our plumbing's set up in our home, that was going to be an issue because one end of our house is pretty low to the ground. And, my husband's not a plumber, so he's like, I'm not sure. So we ended up buying a pump like, a camper like would use to bring the, cost of the water and bring it up. So I think it was $150. And like I said, our water bill went from like $125 a month to something like $70. And so in a couple of, water bills, we paid for this pump, and that's been about 3 years ago, something like that. And then we have all of this water storage for watering our gardens and everything too, which has been wonderful, not only to save money and all this stuff, but also carrying 5-gallon buckets of water. Not much fun.
No, wouldn't be.
I'm all for fitness, but it's like, that's a little much.
Yeah, and our stay off the treadmill and just do that.
Exactly. And, I call it Earth Gym. I'm using Earth Gym. And in the summer, I do that a lot. It's like we live on a hill, too. So if you were going to look for a homestead, if you were out, on a Sunday thinking, where would I like to, homestead, you wouldn't pick where we live. That's another thing I'd like to really point out is like, bloom where you're planted, And I think you talked about that in one of your podcasts where you're like, you and your family had thought one of these days we'll move out to the country and we'll do this and that. Life circumstances changed and you're like, we're going to start doing this now, and whatever scale you can do it on.
That's definitely my anthem. That's what I sing every day, because it's like, you can wait for tomorrow forever, but you can get started right where you're at and just do what you can do right where you're at. And it's amazing what you can do right where you're at. If you're waiting for an ideal situation, you could be waiting a very long time.
You're right. You're exactly right. And that's why I said, I'm 46, my husband's 52. You used to say, one of these days. And I'm famous for saying to my husband, this is one of those days. This is the days we were talking about 20 years ago.
Yep.
We've been married for 26 years, and we started out like, and as a matter of fact, we took a walk this morning, and I'm like, what did we used to talk about before we started homesteading? Because we're like, well, next year we're going to do this variety of whatever. I mean, I tasted my first fresh beet last week. I had never eaten. When I was at home, my mom was in 1950-some, and of course I was born in the 70s, but house life where it was, stovetop instead of potatoes, or whatever, and she always cooked hot meals for us, but it was a lot of boxes and cans and bags because that's what you did then. And so I had only ever tasted a beet from a can, and I thought they tasted like dirt. And that was all I could taste, and I thought they were terrible. So we pulled some beets. I was actually thinning them, and I wanted the greens mostly. But there was a few little small beets. I'm like, okay, I'm going to throw this in the mix because I'm a foodie. I love to cook. And everyone's always like, oh, you're a good cook, and we love to come to your house and eat. And I'm like, oh, I hate this. Why did I start this? But I tried that first fresh beet, and I'm like, this doesn't taste anything like what comes. And I realize now I can taste the can when I eat something out of the can. I can taste that can. What used to be, I just thought that's what everything tasted like. But the fresh foods, I mean, I've become a tomato lover, which I used to hate. And it was because I had eaten grocery store tomatoes. Yeah,
those are two completely different things, aren't they? Garden-raised tomato and a store tomato, it's not even the same thing, not at all.
No, it isn't. Absolutely. Nutrition-wise or flavor,
Right.
It's funny because, my whole adult life or even teenage life, I was always, dieting and, worried about all this stuff. And whenever I would diet, I would go buy diet food in boxes and bags and cans from the store and, whatever the newest thing was, like low fat or whatever it was. And now I realize that, good nutrition, that's the best diet. If you fill up on things out of the garden and things, even, if you choose to eat meat, grass-fed meat, things you're going out and hunting for that are lean, those kind of things, you're not going to need a diet.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
It's wonderful.
Well, it sounds like you've got a ton going on and maybe a few other things in the works for the future.
Right.
And
absolutely.
I can tell you seriously have a heart for homesteading and a heart to help others to homestead as well. I see that through the book and just the encouragement you talk about, helping people any way you can get started or whatever. And I think that's awesome, and I just think that folks ought to get your book for sure because it's really encouraging. It's a great testimony of what you kind of did to get started and how it worked out for you. I'm going to put a link to that book in the show notes for this episode. It's Countercultural Rebel with a Cause. That's an interesting title. How'd you come up with that?
Well, back in the 60s and 70s, counterculture kind of meant something a little bit different. You think of back to the Landers and, and hippies and that kind of thing. And I jokingly call myself a hippie. And people will say they have a different idea of that and say, you're not a hippie, And I'm like, well, I'm a new age hippie, maybe. I don't know. But the reason that I chose that title was because we're living counter to culture. And to me, in our life, it's because we don't shop Walmart. We don't, we have chicken tractors instead of a beautiful lawn. I mean, we used to just pride ourselves on mowing our yard. It looked so pretty, and there was nothing obstructing the view or anything. And my husband was always, oh, don't do this because they don't have to mow around it. Now we've got 20 raised beds and a greenhouse and, a lot of ugly structures even, and it's like, chicken tractors in the front yard and different things like that. It's counter to culture. Yeah. And, we treat our little minor bumps and bruises and illnesses and things with what God gave instead of, what man gave. And that's becoming what is countercultural.
Yeah. I asked that question because of that, because I know even just me, I mean, I just garden and raise a little bit of my own meat, and people seem blown away by that and fascinated by that, like it's something odd, like I'm the one doing something that's so different when it's really the way I think things should be, and that is, these days, it's considered countercultural, and that's why I kind of ask you about it, because it's just, to me, it's just completely twisted. It's backwards, It shouldn't be countercultural.
No, exactly. That should be, the norm, and it used to be the norm.
Yeah, right.
And I kind of feel like, we've gotten lazy as a culture and as a society, and of course that's not everybody, but, we go to the, food comes from the grocery store. Medicine comes from the pharmacy. And, I'll say, I had a little cut or scrape or something, I just grab some yarrow and, chew it up and spit poultice, whatever it is, or something like that. And it's like, will you get an infection or something? It's like, no, that won't help me to not get one. But, the things our grandmothers and great-grandmothers, my mom came from a family of 10 kids, and they lived on, I don't know, it was a huge, big amount of land. My grandpa worked, he was a coal miner. Most of the men in my family have been coal miners, were from West Virginia. And he would go and, maybe walk miles to work his shift, walk miles home. And then, they had the kids there to help with a lot of the farm chores, but he had all that going on. They had cattle at different times. They had horses. They had, of course, chickens and, different times they had hogs, whatever. And, they were a farming family. And I can remember, my grandmother, even in my days growing up back in the late 70s and 80s, she had like herbs tied up in little bundles behind the wood stove or out on the, one of the porches or something. And I remember thinking like how interesting that was and how different that was, because we would go to grandma's and then come home and, take the lid off the Tylenol bottle if you had a headache or whatever. And I'm like, it's so different over there.
Yeah.
And then I found out. It
was so normal for their generation, though.
Yes. And it's funny because, like I said, my parents were married in the late 50s, and it was kind of like, we're going to get loose from this hard way of life. And I understand it's a lot of work. I mean, what I do now, what we do to have chicken on the table is not just run out to the grocery store, Right. But it's like the tomatoes. It's a different thing. It's not the same food. It doesn't taste the same. The nutrition. I can't believe the energy and the change in our health. And none of us were really even sick or anything, but it's just the change in energy levels and,
I think a lot of the problems we have health-wise as a society are mostly because of diet, I would say.
Yes.
Not a doctor, but it just seems so obvious to me as a person who changed his diet and felt the difference and seen it in his own life. I realize the difference there is in that, and it just makes me just kind of realize that there is a real issue there with the food. Right.
I have a niece that's a dentist, and I asked her recently, of the cases that that come to see you, what kind of percentage is, problems that you feel are from a bad diet? And she was like, almost all of them, especially in like, young kids and that kind of thing where, we're feeding our kids these sugars and all this stuff. And it's, like I said, we still have some of that in our diet. And that's one of the differences with our little girl was 3 when we started in all this, our youngest. And so she doesn't remember. Sometimes one of the older kids will say, remember how we used to do whatever? And she was like, I don't remember that because we didn't live like that since she can remember,
Yeah.
So she's really got the advantage in growing up in a culture where, she lost a tooth this past winter. And it bled. It was, kind of one of the bigger teeth. And she was like, it was bleeding, and that scares a little kid. And she goes, Mom, go get the yarrow. She needed to do that. She bit down on it, and it quit bleeding, and that was fun.
That's great.
But she knows these things, and I'm thinking she's not going to have to fight this battle of trying to give up all this junk. What I've found that as I've eaten fresher foods and things, now I'll go pull a carrot out of the ground, wipe it off on my pants, and eat it. And yes, it's still got some dirt on it, and I'm glad of that. You know what I mean? I don't feel like dirt is dirty anymore.
Yeah, right.
There's dirt and there's dirt. But it's just, it's the health of the soil. I always thought, there's the dirt, the ground. I didn't know there was a difference in soil and dirt. So, I didn't understand that you needed the organic matter and you needed all these different things, to make plants grow right and have the right nutrition. And that's what, I'll tell anyone that is out in my yard with me, and, I grow a lot of edible flowers. My goal since we, started homesteading is like, I'm just going to grow flowers that are edible. Well, now I'm realizing most of them are, but, or they're medicinal, some of them don't taste as good as others. But I'll go out and I'm, eating a nasturtium, or I'm eating, whatever, picking these things, or just pick an onion and start munching on it, and I love it. And I'm like, that is living food that you're eating, and these enzymes that are going in your system. And, I think a lot of the diseases and things and the conditions that we have now come from bad nutrition and not having any kind of gut flora that's, worth talking about.
Right.
We need to have, this in our system. And honestly, people that my mom comes out and she eats with us, and she's like, I don't know what it is about your cooking, but she was like, I always feel better. And I'm like, this doesn't come out of cans and boxes and bags. Sometimes it comes out of jars, where we can things. But even at that, we use good quality salt when we're canning and those kind of things. We have a local source of salt, even in West Virginia, J.Q. Dickinson salt. They mine their salt from they call it an underground ocean. So I'm assuming some kind of aquifer. I don't understand it completely. But, when we found out, same lady that, told us about the pastured chickens and all that, she was like, yeah, I had asked on Facebook one day, where can I source, I want a 5-gallon bucket of salt. Where can I do this, that I can afford it? Well, she turned us onto this J.Q. Dickinson Salt Works. And so, yeah, we source our salt as locally as we can. And, that's what even with my mom is 76, I believe. And, she's changing her eating habits now. And she's like, now I can't eat vegetable oil. Now I don't buy the cheap salt anymore, and so it loops back around to the frugal thing. Well, isn't that cheaper? Well, there's things that are cheaper, but they're more expensive in the long run. So really now it boils down to quality. Right.
Yeah. I agree. Well, that's great. You just got so many things you're trying out and doing, and different paths you're taking. You are a fountain of information and encouragement for sure. I'm glad you're in the Homestead Front Porch Facebook group. I have a feeling a lot of folks are going to be reaching out to you for some answers to some questions possibly.
Well, I appreciate that, and I'm enjoying it so much. It's just like finding an online home. It's wonderful. I love it.
Well, I guess folks can reach out to you there. You'll be available in the front porch there for some questions if anybody has any.
Absolutely. They can tag me. They can Facebook friend request me, send me a personal message, whatever they want to do. That's great.
That's great. Yeah, that's great. Well, I'll let you go. I know you're on vacation. I'm on vacation this week, so I guess we'll get back to our vacations and enjoy our weeks, and I'll let you go. But thanks so much for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's been great talking to you. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm sure you enjoyed that interview as much as I did. Thank you so much, Michele, for coming on the podcast. And you can check out her book. I'll have a link in the show notes. This is episode 96. You can go to smalltownhomestead.com/96 and see the show notes. And I'll have a link there for her book and some other links as well. And yeah, check that out. It's really, really good read. It's not a real huge book or anything. You can read it in, a couple days, and I really enjoyed it. It's really good. It's an ebook, but really good. Also, we mentioned the Front Porch Facebook groups. That's the Facebook group for this podcast, and if you want to join, it's a closed group, but all you have to do to join is ask. So just search in Facebook for Homestead Front Porch and then request to join, answer a couple questions. We'll get you right in there. So if you want to talk to Michele, she's in there hanging out. So we'll get back to our regular episodes here later in the week where we're answering questions. If you want to submit a question for the podcast, you can send your questions to ask@smalltownhomestead.com or call or text in your questions to our voicemail at 765-203-1949. You can submit as many questions as you like, as often as you like. I always need more questions for more episodes. So keep those questions coming, folks. And as usual, this podcast is made possible by those who join our Homestead Forum membership community. And you can learn more about the benefits of membership there at thehomesteadforum.com, or you can just head on over to smalltownhomestead.com, and there's links there for the Homestead Forum membership community as well. So thank you so much for joining me today, and until next time, happy homesteading, and God bless.
Thanks for listening. To see the show notes for this podcast or listen to other podcast episodes, go to smalltownhomestead.com. There you can also read our blog, connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Google+, and take advantage of the many resources we make available to help you along in your homesteading journey. Please share this podcast and help us to carry out our mission of helping others to homestead today for a better tomorrow.